The security badge reader blinked red 3 times before the error message appeared. Access credentials revoked. Standing there in the executive corridor of Vanguard Cloud Systems headquarters, laptop bag still slung over my shoulder, the reality of what just happened started to sink in. 25 minutes ago, I had been in the main server room completing the final authentication protocols for the biggest deal in our company's history. Now, I could not even get into the boardroom where that very deal was supposed to close. I knew there was no mistake, though I tried to tell myself otherwise. The expression on the young man, blocking the doorway, made everything clear. "There was no mistake," Bradley Albright replied, his tone dripping with the kind of unearned confidence that comes from a lifetime of never facing real consequences. "Your IT background is ancient history. The cloud architecture team does not need legacy specialists anymore. We are moving in a different direction." He stepped forward, forcing me to take a step back into the hallway. "So, clear out. We have actual decision-makers arriving any minute." Bradley was 31 years old, 23 years younger than me. He had joined Vanguard Cloud Systems 6 months ago, immediately after his father, Preston Albright, acquired a controlling interest in the company. Bradley's title was Chief Innovation Officer, though everyone in the building knew what that really meant. He was being groomed to take over, learning the business from the top down, which would have been fine except he had no intention of actually learning anything. Behind him, through the clean glass walls of the boardroom, I could see the presentation I had spent 8 weeks preparing. My slides, my infrastructure diagrams, my security protocols, and the entire cloud migration strategy that would move Meridian Data Solutions' operations onto our platform. It was a $5,800,000 contract that would quadruple Vanguard's valuation overnight. I looked at the presentation screen, then back at Bradley. "Bradley, I am the lead architect on this project," I said, keeping my voice level and controlled. "Alistair Coleman from Meridian is expecting me to walk him through the technical specifications, the authentication frameworks, and the redundancy protocols." "Were you not listening, Lawrence?" Bradley cut me off, crossing his arms. "I said we are going in a different direction. My team has updated everything. Your approach was too conservative, too focused on old-school security models. Coleman wants innovation, not paranoia." The elevator chimed behind me. Bradley's eyes flicked past my shoulder and his whole demeanor shifted instantly. Shoulders back, chin up, salesmanship smile activated. "Mr. Coleman." Bradley's voice boomed with artificial warmth. "Welcome to Vanguard Cloud Systems. I am Bradley Albright, Chief Innovation Officer. We are absolutely thrilled to finalize this partnership today." I turned around. Alistair Coleman stepped off the elevator, flanked by 2 executives I recognized from our weekly video calls. His Chief Technology Officer, Sarah Linwood, and Chief Security Officer, Jared Fletcher. Coleman was in his late 50s, silver-haired, with the kind of quiet presence that came from building a multi-billion-dollar enterprise from scratch. His eyes swept the corridor, landing on me with recognition. "Mr. Jennings." He nodded, then looked at Bradley with confusion. "Is there a problem? We are ready to begin the technical review." Bradley did not miss a beat. "Actually, Mr. Coleman, we have made some exciting improvements to the proposal. I will be personally walking you through our enhanced infrastructure design." Lawrence was just leaving. He is transitioning to other projects. That was my name, Lawrence Jennings, Senior Cloud Architect at Vanguard Cloud Systems, or at least I had been 1 hour ago. What happened in that corridor became the most expensive 15-minute conversation in Vanguard's history. Before that moment, I had spent 12 years building this company from a scrappy team of 60 employees. I was employee number 24. I had built our cloud infrastructure from the ground up, designed our security architecture, and mentored a dozen engineers who had gone on to leadership roles. When Preston Albright bought the company 6 months ago, I had been cautiously optimistic. Capital infusion meant growth, better resources, and bigger opportunities. Then Bradley arrived, and within weeks the culture started to rot. But this moment in the corridor was different. This was Bradley actively sabotaging the most critical deal in our history, because he could not tolerate someone else being the smartest person in the room. Coleman's expression shifted into something harder to read. I appreciate innovation, Mr. Albright, but we have spent 8 weeks reviewing Mr. Jennings's architecture. Our security team has vetted every protocol. Our compliance officers have signed off on his framework, unless there has been a fundamental change of which I am unaware. Improvements, not changes, Bradley said smoothly, waving his hand. Lawrence did solid foundational work, but we have optimized the approach. It is more efficient, more scalable, and more aligned with cutting-edge cloud paradigms. I caught Sarah Linwood's eye. The Meridian CTO looked deeply concerned. During our technical deep joys over the past month and a half, we had developed a working rapport. She knew the architecture inside and out. She also knew that last-minute changes to enterprise cloud infrastructure were red flags, not selling points. What kind of optimizations? Linwood asked. Bradley gestured toward the boardroom. Why don't we sit down? I will walk everyone through the enhanced design. Lawrence, you are dismissed. That was when I made a decision. I could have walked away. I should have probably gone to human resources, called my attorney, or filed complaints through the proper corporate channels. But something in Alistair Coleman's expression told me he needed to understand exactly what was happening. And more importantly, I needed to know if Bradley had actually touched my infrastructure. I stood my ground, refusing to take a single step toward the elevators. The hallway felt suddenly small, the air thick with tension as the client team watched us. Mr. Coleman, I spoke directly to the Rizon CEO, ignoring Bradley entirely. Before we begin, I need to ask, do you have the Master Cloud Clearance credentials with you? Coleman's eyebrows raised slightly. He glanced at Sarah Linwood, who was already holding her tablet, then back at me. The access codes you sent over yesterday? Yes, my team has them. Why? I smiled, though there was no warmth in it. My eyes moved to Bradley, who was glaring at me with a mixture of fury and sudden panic. Because he just expelled me from this meeting, which means per our security protocols, I have initiated an infrastructure lockdown. The entire cloud network is now in secured status. No access, no migration, and no deal closure can occur until I manually restore clearance. The silence in that corridor could have suffocated someone. Bradley's face went through several color changes in a matter of seconds, moving from a triumphant pink to a sickly pale white. What are you talking about, Lawrence? You cannot just do that. You do not have the authority to freeze company property. Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the Security Framework, I said calmly. I had written that clause myself during our initial technical integration meetings. Any lead architect removed from a project without a designated transition period must immediately secure their infrastructure to prevent unauthorized access or modification. It is an automatic system trigger. The moment you revoked my credentials and dismissed me from the team, the lockdown triggered. API keys were instantly deactivated and administrative tokens were frozen. Jared Fletcher, Meridian's chief security officer, actually laughed. He is right, Fletcher said, adjusting his glasses. I remember that clause. We specifically approved it because it prevents exactly this scenario, unauthorized personnel making changes to critical infrastructure. Bradley's face was now approaching crimson. I am not unauthorized personnel, he shouted, his voice echoing in the corridor. I am the chief innovation officer of this company. With zero administrative access to the cloud environment, Mr. Jennings built, Linwood said, pulling up her active system status screen. I am showing system status as locked. The entire pipeline is in read-only mode and the database migration is completely halted. She looked at Bradley with something between pity and disgust. You just bricked a $5,800,000 deal. This is insane. Bradley turned to Coleman, his hands gesturing wildly. Sir, I apologize for this unprofessional behavior. This is clearly sabotage from a disgruntled employee. I will have our IT team override his lockdown immediately. And with what credentials? I asked, crossing my arms. I am the only administrator with master access keys. That was a specific requirement from Meridian's security team. A single point of accountability during migration setup to prevent exactly the kind of unvetted optimizations you are describing. Coleman was staring at Bradley with an expression I recognized. I had seen it before on experienced executives' faces, the exact moment they realized the person they were negotiating with was completely incompetent. It was a look of reassessment, calculation, and quiet anger. Let me make sure I understand. Coleman's voice had gone very quiet, which was somehow more intimidating than shouting. You removed the lead architect from this project. The only person with access credentials to the infrastructure we are purchasing 30 minutes before our deal closure meeting. It is not like that. He is exaggerating the situation. Bradley stammered, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. We can work around this. My team can rebuild access. Or we can bring in our parent company's enterprise specialists. Rebuild access to a secured cloud environment. Fletcher shook his head. That would take weeks, if not months, if he built it properly. And any forced override would compromise the entire security framework, which would violate our compliance requirements. We could not legally migrate our data onto a platform that has been breached. Sarah Linwood was typing rapidly on her tablet. I am showing that the presentation files are also locked. Whatever enhanced design you were planning to show us, Mr. Albright, we cannot access it. That was when Bradley made his second massive mistake. Instead of apologizing, instead of trying to de-escalate, he turned on me with pure venom. You vindictive relic. This is corporate sabotage. I will have you arrested. You are holding our infrastructure hostage, extorting the company. I am following protocol, I said quietly. A protocol that Meridian Data Solutions specifically required and approved. If I am still terminated from this project, I will spend the next 72 hours documenting the handoff process and working with whoever you designate as the new lead architect. But that is a 72-hour minimum for proper security transfer. It is the industry standard. Coleman raised a hand, cutting off whatever Bradley was about to say next. Mr. Albright, I need to speak with your father now. My father is in Europe on business, Bradley stammered. Then get him on a video call, Coleman ordered. Because right now I am trying to decide whether Meridian Data Solutions has any business partnering with Vanguard Cloud Systems at all. The color drained from Bradley's face. Sir, I am sure we can resolve this misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Linwood said. You fired the lead architect on a $5,800,000,000 project without verifying who had critical access. That is not a misunderstanding. That is catastrophically bad judgment. Bradley looked around desperately, as if someone might materialize to rescue him. The handful of Vanguard employees who had gathered in the corridor quickly found reasons to be elsewhere. Nobody wanted to be associated with this disaster. Lawrence Coleman turned to me, his tone completely different. I apologize for this situation. Can you give me an honest assessment? Is this deal salvageable today? I considered the question professionally, dispassionately, the way I had been trained to assess crisis situations. Technically, yes, I can restore access in about 20 minutes. The infrastructure is solid. Nothing has been damaged, just secured. We can proceed with the original presentation and timeline. I paused, but Mr. You need to understand what Bradley meant when he said his team made optimizations. Enlighten me, Coleman said. 4 days ago, I was copied on an email thread, accidentally I think, where Bradley was discussing streamlining our security protocols. Specifically, he wanted to reduce the encryption layers on data transmission to improve performance benchmarks. He also suggested eliminating redundant backup systems to cut operational costs. Jared Fletcher's face went pale. Please tell me he did not implement any of that. He did not have access to implement anything. But those were the improvements he was planning to present today. Faster speeds, lower costs, and more impressive demo metrics. I met Coleman's eyes, and absolutely none of it would have met your compliance. The first security audit would have failed. You would have been legally prohibited from storing client data on our platform. The silence stretched out. Sarah Linwood broke it. He was going to blow up a $5,800,000,000 deal to make the demo look flashier. I do not think he understood that is what he was doing, I said. I think he genuinely believed security protocols were just red tape, unnecessary complexity that people like me add to justify our jobs. Coleman turned to Bradley with an expression of absolute contempt. Is that true? Bradley's mouth opened and closed several times. The encryption layers do slow down performance. I was trying to find a balance between security and efficiency. There is no balance, Fletcher exploded. We are a data consortium. We manage healthcare records, financial transactions, and personal information for 200 million users. Security is not negotiable. I understand that. I just thought. Bradley began. You did not think. Coleman cut him off. That is the problem. Lawrence, if you are willing, I would like to proceed with the original presentation, your design, your protocols, and your team. Of course, I said. And Mr. Albright, Coleman's voice could have cut glass. You are going to sit in that boardroom silently and observe what professional competence looks like. Then you are going to call your father and explain why Meridian's partnership with Vanguard now includes a contractual requirement that you have zero involvement in any technical decisions. Bradley's face was ashen. You cannot do that. I can and I will, Coleman said. Those are the terms. Take them or we walk. Coleman checked his watch. You have 30 seconds to decide. Bradley looked at me with pure hatred, but he nodded slowly. Good, Coleman said. Lawrence, whenever you are ready. I pulled out my phone and opened the secure admin app. My fingers moved through the authentication sequence I had performed hundreds of times. Biometric scan, rotating passcode, secondary verification. The system status changed from red to amber to green. Access restored, I said. Welcome to Vanguard Cloud Systems, Mr. Coleman. I apologize for the delay. The boardroom meeting lasted 4 hours. I walked Alistair Coleman, Sarah Linwood, and Jared Fletcher through every aspect of the cloud. The redundant security layers that Bradley had wanted to eliminate, the encryption protocols that met healthcare and financial industry standards, the backup systems that guaranteed 99.99% uptime, and the scalability frameworks that would let Meridian grow without rebuilding architecture. Bradley sat in the corner, silent, watching his authority evaporate with each slide. Linwood asked detailed technical questions. Fletcher stress-tested the security scenarios. Coleman listened, occasionally interjecting with business considerations. It was the meeting for which I had prepared so thoroughly. At the end, Coleman stood and extended his hand. Lawrence, this is exceptional work. Sarah, Jared, any concerns? Both executives shook their heads. Linwood actually smiled. This is the most robust enterprise cloud architecture I have reviewed in 5 years. I feel completely confident migrating our operations. Then we have a deal, Coleman said. Lawrence, I assume you will be our primary point of contact during implementation. That is typically how we structure these projects. Yes, I replied. Good. I will feel much better knowing you are overseeing the technical execution. He glanced at Bradley. I would like to speak with Preston Albright about personnel assignments before we finalize the contract. But the technical framework is approved. After Meridian's team left, Bradley and I stood alone in the boardroom. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating the presentation screen, still showing my final slide. Bradley's voice was low and venomous. You think you have won something here? My father owns this company. One call from me and you are finished. Maybe, I acknowledged. But that call is going to be really interesting. You will have to explain how you nearly destroyed a $5,800,000,000 deal because you could not tolerate someone else being more competent than you. You will have to explain why Meridian now requires contractual language keeping you away from technical decisions. You will have to explain why the client trusts me more than they trust the owner's son. You sabotaged me, Bradley hissed. I did my job, I said quietly. I built infrastructure that works. I established security protocols that protect client data. I created safeguards to prevent unauthorized changes. That is not sabotage, Bradley. That is competence, something you might consider developing instead of coasting on your father's money. His hand actually twitched toward me, and for a second, I thought he might do something catastrophically stupid, but he caught himself. Get out, he hissed. Gladly. I have implementation timeline documents to prepare. I gathered my materials and headed toward my office on the 3rd floor. My phone buzzed halfway down the A security alert from the infrastructure monitoring system. I pulled it out and my stomach dropped. Unauthorized access attempt. Server room 2. Multiple failed authentication attempts. Physical breach detected. I broke into a run, taking the stairs 2 at a time down to the server floor. The secure door to server room 2 was propped open with a doorstop, and I could hear voices inside. Bradley's voice and another I recognized as Keith Montgomery, head of IT operations for Albright Holdings, Preston's parent company. I yanked the door open. Bradley and Keith were standing in front of the main server rack. Keith's laptop was connected directly to the infrastructure backbone via an emergency maintenance port. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. Bradley spun around, his face flushed with anger and desperation. "Getting back what is mine. Keith is overriding your lockdown protocols. In about 2 minutes, I will have full administrative access, and you will be the one locked out." Keith looked extremely uncomfortable. "Bradley, this really is not right." "Keep working," Bradley snapped. I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the emergency response screen. "Keith, you have 20 seconds to disconnect that laptop before the system triggers a catastrophic security breach protocol. Connecting a non-vetted external device to a maintenance port after credentials have been officially revoked is a direct violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act under Title 18, Section 1030 of the United States Code. More than that, this rack hosts protected health information for Meridian's clients. A physical breach of this nature violates the HIPAA security rule under Title 45, Part 164 of the Code of Federal Regulations. If I do not report this security incident within 24 hours, I will be personally liable, and Vanguard Cloud Systems will face civil penalties of up to $1,800,000. By attempting to force this bypass using credentials that were already legally revoked, you are committing corporate forgery under California Penal Code. Section 470, which renders any authorization you try to fabricate void ab initio and exposes you and the parent company to a direct lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty. "He is bluffing," Bradley said, but his voice wavered. "Am I?" I asked, holding up my phone so they could see the countdown timer. 16 seconds. "This is a federal compliance requirement, Bradley. Any unauthorized physical access to servers containing protected health information triggers mandatory breach response. That means we have to report this to Meridian, who has to report it to federal regulators, who will fine both companies millions of dollars. Your father will lose the deal, face regulatory penalties, and probably lose his data handling license." 11 seconds. Keith's hands froze over his keyboard. "Bradley, he is right. If this registers as a breach, we are done." "He is trying to scare you," Bradley yelled. "He will not actually trigger it." 6 seconds. I tapped the screen. The countdown stopped at 5 seconds. Then, I pressed the manual escalation button. Alarms erupted throughout the building. Red emergency lighting flooded the server room. Keith yanked his laptop cable out, so fast he knocked over a tool bag. Bradley's face went from red to pale in an instant. "You are insane," Bradley shouted over the alarms. I was already on my phone dialing building security. "This is Lawrence Jennings, Senior Cloud Architect. I have an unauthorized breach in server room 2. Send security immediately." "Yes, I will stay on the line." Footsteps thundered down the corridor. 3 security guards burst through the door, hands on their equipment belts. "Mr. Jennings?" the lead guard asked. I pointed at Keith's laptop, still connected by a dangling cable. "Lot system access attempt. I need this room secured, that equipment confiscated as evidence, and both of these men escorted from the building." "Evidence?" Bradley sputtered. "You cannot do this. I work here. You authorized a physical breach of a secured server environment containing protected client data," I said coldly. "That is a federal crime, Bradley. I have to report this. It is not optional." The security guards looked at each other. Bradley was the owner's son, but I was the one with authority over the server infrastructure, and they knew it. "Sir, you will need to come with us," the lead guard said to Bradley. "Call my father," Bradley demanded. "Call him right now." "We will, sir, after we secure the scene." They escorted Bradley and Keith out. I stayed behind running diagnostics on every system Keith's laptop had touched. The access attempt had been crude, trying to brute force override the authentication system. He had not gotten far, but the attempt itself was enough to trigger every compliance protocol we had. My phone rang, Preston Albright. "Lawrence, what is happening? Security just called me about alarms and my son being detained." "Bradley attempted to physically breach the server room with an outside contractor," I said. "They were trying to override security protocols by connecting directly to the infrastructure backbone. I have it on security footage and system logs." Silence on the line. Then Preston spoke quietly. "Is the Meridian data compromised?" "No. I stopped them before they accessed anything critical, but we have to report the attempt. It is a federal law." I understand. Preston's voice was strained. Do what you need to do. I will be on the next flight back. The fallout took 3 days to fully materialize. Preston Albright returned from Europe and had a 6-hour meeting with Alistair Coleman. Bradley was removed from any role involving client relations or technical decisions. His title remained Chief Innovation Officer, but it was now an empty designation. He had an office, a salary, and absolutely no authority. Meanwhile, Coleman insisted on a contract amendment that gave me direct oversight of the Meridian implementation, with a provision that I could not be removed from the project without Meridian's written approval. Preston Albright pulled me into his office 5 days after the incident. "Lawrence, I owe you an apology," he said. "I put my son in a position he was not ready for, and he nearly cost us." "Alistair Coleman spoke very highly of you," Preston continued. "He said you are the only reason he is still willing to do business with us. He also suggested strongly that we restructure your role and compensation." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was an offer letter: Vice President of Cloud Architecture, a significant salary increase, an equity stake in Vanguard Cloud Systems, and a guaranteed seat in technical decision-making for all major contracts. "This is contingent on the successful Meridian implementation," Preston said. "But Coleman seems confident you will deliver. Are you interested?" I took 36 hours to consider it. I scheduled calls with Sarah Linwood and Jared Fletcher. Both confirmed that their leadership wanted me specifically involved in the long-term partnership. Linwood even mentioned that Meridian was considering additional cloud projects that could be worth another $3 billion over 6 years if they had confidence in the technical team. That was real, concrete leverage. I went back to Preston Albright with a counteroffer. The vice president title, yes. The salary and equity, yes. But I also wanted the authority to restructure the engineering team, hire additional senior architects, and establish technical review protocols that prevented anyone, including Bradley, from making infrastructure decisions without proper vetting. Preston agreed to everything. Bradley, predictably, was furious. He went to his father demanding my termination, claiming I had humiliated him. Preston's response was devastating. "You humiliated yourself, Bradley. Lawrence just refused to cover for your incompetence." The Meridian Data Consortium migration took 11 months. We moved 630 terabytes of data, established security protocols across 18 regional data centers, integrated with Meridian's existing systems, and stress-tested every possible failure scenario. Bradley had no involvement. He would show up to the office occasionally, attend meetings he was not invited to speak at, and basically serve as a cautionary tale about the difference between authority and competence. The Meridian implementation launched successfully on schedule. 0 security breaches, 99.97% uptime in the first 5 months, and client satisfaction scores that exceeded every benchmark. Alistair Coleman sent a company-wide email to Vanguard, praising the technical team and specifically mentioning my leadership. Preston Albright forwarded it to me with a short message: "Thank you." Bradley sent nothing, but 3 weeks after the successful launch, he stopped coming to the office. Officially, he was pursuing other opportunities. Unofficially, Preston had finally accepted that his son did not have the skills for a leadership role in a tech company. Bradley was transitioned into a position at one of Preston's real estate holding companies in Miami, where his showmanship would be less catastrophic. I did not celebrate his departure. I felt a little sorry for him. Bradley had been set up to fail by a father who gave him authority without requiring him to develop competence. That is a recipe for disaster. 4 years after that corridor confrontation, Vanguard Cloud Systems was acquired by a major tech conglomerate for $11.6 billion. The Meridian contract and subsequent enterprise cloud business were cited as primary assets. Preston Albright made a fortune. So did everyone with equity stakes, including. At the acquisition celebration, Preston pulled me aside. "You know what is funny, Lawrence?" he said. "If Bradley had just let you run that meeting, none of this would have happened. He tried to take credit for your work, and instead he created the circumstances that let everyone see exactly how valuable you were. You saved this company, then you built it into something worth billions. Thank you. As for me, I took my equity payout and started my own cloud security consulting firm. Small, specialized, focused on helping companies build infrastructure that prioritizes security and reliability. Several of the engineers I mentored at Vanguard joined me. We work with clients who understand that the cheapest solution is rarely the best, who value expertise over credentials, and who recognize that the person doing the actual work knows more than the executive with the impressive title. And nobody on my team will ever be excluded from a boardroom because someone's insecure son decided they were a threat.